Greetings from Frederick, Maryland. My name is Hollis Thoms, and I am the composer of Requiem for 9/11. I am also the father of the conductor of Dakota Pro Musica, Dr. Jason Thoms. I want to thank Jason and Dakota Pro Musica and the North Dakota Heritage Center and State Museum for the opportunity to have this piece performed once again. We all know where we were when the 9/11 2001 tragedy occurred. We were all blindsided by this tragedy, and suddenly, without warning, our country was traumatized. I remember where I was, and you probably remember where you were back then. I was principal of an elementary school in Southern California, and remember being in the bathroom of our home shaving before school when my wife Jacqueline said, "You need to come and see this." The image of the tower smoking and then collapsing was surreal and unforgettable. Everything had suddenly changed. While over the past 20 years, we as a world, nation, and individually have had many other tragedies to deal with, including the present coronavirus pandemic, still the memory of 9/11 lingers. To me, the Requiem for 9/11 is a reminder that tragedies can occur suddenly and without warning. We experience this as a world, as a nation, and individually. We have all had our own personal 9/11 tragedies. So, this Requiem still has a message of comfort and hope 20 years later. It wasn't until a year after 9/11 attacks that I began to work on a piece reflecting on the significance of 9/11. As was the case, every day after principal work in Southern California, I would go on my 4-mile run through Glendale and sometimes stop at a bookstore at the halfway point of my run to look at books. On one occasion, I came across a new book in 2002 entitled September 11th, 2001, American Writers Respond. And here's that book. Later in the day, after showering and getting more presentable, I went back to the store and bought the book. I immediately began to read through the poems. From the collection, I found 5 poems that I thought would form a song cycle. Diane Seuss's Falling Man, Lucille Langday's Strangers, Rachel Vigier, Burnt Ground, David Mason's A Survivor, and Aliki Barnstone, Making Love After September 11th, 2001. The theme of falling emerged, and I decided to end the cycle with Rainer Maria Rilke's famous poem, Herbst, which I had set to music years before as the last movement of an organ work I had written in 1976 for my wife, Jacqueline. The Rilke poem vividly described the falling of leaves and the falling of us all, yet there was one who holds us, as we all fall, gently in his hands. The cycle expressed both the horror of the day, but also a message of hope. With the cycle of poems complete, I began setting the poems to music for soprano and string ensemble. I spent considerable time composing the work. My Requiem for 9/11 became a turning point work for me compositionally. It was one of my first significant larger works, 35 minutes in length, and became a very moving and poignant work for the audience, and one that would be performed 7 times throughout subsequent years, and will now receive its 8th performance by Dakota Pro Musica. I received permission from the editor and 5 poets to use their poems, and they were delighted to receive the program and CD from the premiere performance. Years ago, my daughter Sonia was a senior in oboe performance at the Eastman School of Music, and she was also an excellent conductor. She had premiered a number of my works at Eastman, both as an oboist and conductor. My wife and I went to Eastman for her graduation ceremonies in May of 2003. And she was able, during that week, to get some students together to read through and record my Requiem for 9/11. The actual concert premiere of the work occurred 2 years later when my daughter-in-law, Treva Foss, was a soprano soloist, and my oldest son, Jason, conducted the performance at a special concert at St. John's College, Annapolis, Maryland. Treva had made this work her own and sang it many times under the direction of her husband, Jason. The work was performed on the 10th anniversary of 9/11 at Christ Lutheran Church, Inner Harbor in Baltimore, followed by a panel discussion on the significance of 9/11 10 years later. The work is also part of the 9/11 Memorial Collection in New York City, and you can hear 2 movements of the work by going to the artistry directory there and finding my name. The unexpected death of my daughter-in-law Treva last year gives special poignancy to this performance by Dakota Pro Musica. The work was dedicated to her, and I will always hear her distinctively powerful lyrical voice when it is performed. I am thankful to soprano Natalie Campbell for her artistry in carrying on the voice of Treva. We cannot just remember the devastating images from that horrible day. It isn't enough to just recall and re-experience, though the first 5 movements based on these extraordinary poems do just that. There needs to be some sort of redeeming and renewing message that transforms the 9/11 experience from a tragedy to one of hope and faith. The Rilke poem, Herbst, does just that. My Requiem for 9/11 provides that message of hope and faith as it moves once again through the tragic events of that horrible day to a realization of hope and a statement of faith. We all fall, yet as we fall, there is one who holds us in his hands. My hope is that as this Requiem for 9/11 musically moves through the experiences of that unforgettable day, that you find at the end of the piece that hope and faith that carries you forward into a meaningful and joyful future.